Okay. Good evening. Today we're learning Maseches Bava Daf Yud Zayin, and we're starting at the Mishnah a little bit more than halfway down on Tez Zayin Amud Beis. This Mishnah we've already seen in other Mar Makomos, another blot over the past couple of weeks, and that is as follows: Ma bein tam lemuad. Fundamental question: what are the differences between a docile animal and a dangerous animal, as we've been calling them? The word Ella does not belong here. According to the Tefusim Yeshanim in the side, the word Ella should be removed. The answer is Sha'atam mishalim chatziniz mikufo. A tam is paid from the animal itself. Muad mishalim nezik shalim minhu aliyah, and a muad, an animal. If I am the mazik, I'm the owner of the animal that's muad, and I let my animal, I didn't do proper shmir, my animal hurts your animal, I have to pay you minhu aliyah. Says the Gemara, my aliyah. What does it mean aliyah? Says the Gemara, from the best of the best. Your edis, as we've been calling it in our Masechta, the finest of your properties. So says the Gemara, we're going to bring a text proof from a very odd place. And the Gemara says, V'chein hu omer, we have a pasuk in Sefer Divrei Hayamim. The pasuk says, Vayishkav Yechizkiyahu im avosav, vayikberu b'mala kibrei b'nei David. He died, and he was buried b'mala in the great of the burial chambers of the B'nai David. Rabbi Lazar b'mala. What does the word b'mala in that pasuk mean? He was buried with the finest, with the best of the mishpacha. Who is that? Uman ninhu. Says the Gemara, David u'Shlomo. That Chizkiyahu was buried. Good historical fact. It's a good. If you ever play Trivial Pursuit, Jewish version, this would be a fantastic question. Who was buried next to David and Shlomo? And l'chora, the answer is going to be Chizkiyahu. They were the me'ula shebimishpacha. So what do we see from here? We see that the word ma'aleh, I don't know, it just strikes me, why do we need this? I don't know. I'm sure the Rishonim deal with this, but like, I know what the word ma'aleh means, and I can think of other Mari Makomos, a korban ola. How about that? I don't know the 100 things that have the same shoresh. I don't know why the Gemara goes to left field and also from Nevi'im, no less. Nevertheless, the Gemara brings a Mari Makom that the word ma'aleh means of the finest, from a place that we might not have ever thought, which is the burial plot for Chizkiyahu. And the Gemara continues on this topic. By Ikbaru, they actually did bury him. B'kibros of Asher Karlo be'ir David. He was in a place that was dug out in Ir David. That's where David is buried. I've been to his kever there. I'm sure many of you have been there as well. There's a burial spot somewhere in the annals of Ir David. And they buried Chizkiyahu in a place that was filled with besamim v'zanim. These words are a little cryptic. Now we're totally off the reservation. We're no longer talking about. We went from the dakus of Tam and Muad to what the burial plot smelled like. It's like a fascinating run of events. So asks the Gemara 2/3 of the way down, my besamim v'zanim. What does it mean that it was besamim v'zanim? So says the Gemara, answer number one, Rabbi Lazar Amar Zini Zini. Rashi explains that Zini Means that it smelled very good. They had a lot of good spices there. And then the next one's not quite as good. It was some type of smell that had an aphrodisiac type of effect on a person, and it would cause them to do things that were inappropriate. Then the Gemara continues with a pasuk. This pasuk, the Gemara says on the side, is from Yirmiyahu. That Yirmiyahu says that they tried to trap him. Rabbi Lazar Amar shechashtuhu mizona, that they thought that perhaps Yirmiyahu had been with a zona, with a prostitute. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar no shechashtu me'eshes ish. It wasn't a prostitute; it was another man's wife. Quite a big difference. Says the Gemara, Bishlam alamad Amar shechashtu mizona. I could understand why you could say that perhaps Yirmiyahu had been with a zona because of the wording of the pasuk. The pasuk that we quoted a couple lines ago was Kikaru Shucha, and what do we see over here? Same exact language, that the word Shucha is connected to the word Zona, so that makes sense. Why then, if it was Eshes Ish, then we have the wrong word in the pasuk. It shouldn't have said Kikaru Shucha. The Gemara says that's not a good argument. Atu Eshes Ish, just because a woman's married, doesn't mean she isn't a Zona too. Yeah. A woman can check two boxes at the same time. She might be a woman who is halachically married, but she's very promiscuous. So she is wearing two caps. She is an Eshes Ish, and she's a Zona. Very good. So the Gemara says, "Mi nafka michlal zona." Just because you get married doesn't make you more. I mean, I hope it should. Halavai. You shouldn't get married unless you're appropriate. But if you're inappropriate before you get married and you're inappropriate after you get married, you're still a zona. Nothing changed. So the Gemara says that the pasuk is still mashma that way. Says the Gemara, another question. I could understand, says the Gemara, as to why perhaps the pasuk was hinting to a concern that the people had about Yirmiyahu, that perhaps he was involved with an Eshes Ish. I know that's what the pasuk means when it says which talks about death, and we know that sleeping with an Eshes Ish is punishable by death. So that's why the pasuk says Lamus. That makes sense. Why does the pasuk say in regards to a zona, if a man is intimate with a zona, it's an Isser Doraisa on many levels, multiple Isurim at different phases of the intimacy, for sure, no doubt. But you're not chayiv misa for it, you're chayiv malchus for it. So then, why would the pasuk then say lamus? So the Gemara says that they actually took Yirmiyahu and they threw him into a pit of sorts. I'm imagining like a quicksand kind of a thing where he has a hard time getting out, and that would have led to his death, even though it wasn't deserving halachically because of zimus, whatever the case may be. There's a whole Torah here about the Churban Beis Hamikdash. He had just given the nevuah that the Beis Hamikdash, not good. 6 lines from the bottom, the Gemara continues. Darash Rava, the Agadata continues. Rava says, what does the pasuk mean? This pasuk is also from Yirmiyahu. The pasuk says, what does this mean? Yirmiyahu says to Hashem, if bad people, even when they're doing righteous things, direct them, misguide them so that which they give goes to the wrong person. Those are rough political times. Those are rough political times for a Navi. What does the pasuk mean when it says that they did an honor for him in death? I skipped a line, didn't I? Nope. That when he died, that they actually had a yeshiva. It was a temporary yeshiva, maybe like in a tent. They had him learning there, al-kivro, right next to or on top of his kever. It seems on top of his kever. Can it mamish be on top of his kever? Tumas ohel. You got kohanim in the room. Does it mamish mean al-kivro? Maybe there's no kohanim. Maybe the kever is buried in a way where there's tefach golel. There's a tefach of space between the mace and the top of the body, so all the tumah is contained. It's whatever the answer is. That's all you got to see the Rishonim here. And says the Gemara, one way or the other, pligi bar of Nasan v'Rabbanan Chadam or Shlosha, that it was there for 3 days, top of Yud Zayin, but Aleph v'Chadam or Shiva, that the yeshiva was there for 7 days. And then the Gemara says, really, it was even longer, V'Amr L'Shloshim, that it was there for 30 days. Tanu Rabbanan, this pasuk as well, not only in regards to, now we're going to go back to Chizkiyahu. The pasuk says, L'chvod asula b'moso, they did an honor for him, Zechizkiyahu melech Yehuda. When Chizkiah died, what happened? Shiyatzi lefanav shloshim v'shisha elef chalutze katef. There were 36,000 people that had their shoulders revealed. What does it mean they had their shoulders revealed? They were tearing kriya. So we have this din halacha l'maisa that we got Rachmana litzlan. If a person's Rebbe Muvhag dies, they're chayiv to tear kriya. The Gadol Ador dies, you're chayiv to tear kriya. So that should have been the case by Rav Chaim Kanievsky, that people would tear kriya, not on the left side. We only tear on the left side for a parent, Rachmana litzlan, but we tear for all other kriyas on the right side. When I tore kriya for my brother, right side. When a person tears kriya for a parent, left side. Doctors who are present at, let's say, doctors, an emergency room physician who sees patients die all the time. Rahman al-Aslan. So really, according to some poskim, they should have a little tear, like a little mashu at the bottom of their, so they'll take like a scalpel, do a little tear, and they'll do a little thing on there. So you should always be by Yitzias Neshama. If you're present by Yitzias Neshama, some poskim write that that's what you should do. That's considered appropriate. By Chizkiyahu, 36,000 people had their shoulder revealed. There were 36,000 people at his funeral. Yud Zayin Amar 4 lines down. Amar le Reb Nechemya v'alo lifnei Achav asuchein. Achav was no tzaddik, and he also had 36,000 people by his levaya. As we have seen from today's climate, there are people who are horrendous human beings for being praised. So he also had 36,000 people who. So says the Gemara, you're right. Except that by Chizkiyahu, they took a Sefer Torah out of the Aron Kodesh. They brought it to where Chizkiyahu was, and they put it on his bed. 4 words that could not be more poignant. And they say that Kayim Zeh, this one, Chizkiyahu, in his lifetime, he was kaim zeh mashakasu bazeh. Sorry, it's 5 words. That he was able to fulfill every single din, every shach, every taz, even before the shach and the taz existed. He was able to fulfill halacha accordingly. Says the Gemara, v'ha'idna nami avdinan hachi. Big deal. We do that today too. It's not just a din by Chizkiah. Says the Gemara, that's not true. Today we're only afuke mafkinan. We take out the Torah, but anuche lo manchinan. But we don't place the Sefer Torah on the bed of a mace. That we no longer do. Says the Gemara that maybe that's not even true. V'Iba 10 lines down. Perhaps anuche nami manchin. And not only do we take out the Torah, but we also put it down on the bed of a mace. However, kayem lo amrina. But we don't say that phrase of kayem zeh mashakasa bazeh. We don't give the accolade of he who just passed away was able to fulfill all that was in the Torah. Too much that was limited for Chizkiah. Everybody makes mistakes. There are no longer any people in the world who are righteous, which is a little sad. I'm sure there are Lamed Vavniks, I have no doubt, the most righteous among us, but I don't know that any of us are free of sin. The Gemara says, I think there are only 6 people, Binyamin. Who else was in the list? Yeah, what was it? Yishai. Who else? Anybody remember the others? I don't remember that. Where was that Gemara? We definitely learned it here a long time ago.
No.
I don't know. Maybe Gilad. I don't know.
The father of David, the son of David.
Yishai. David ben Yishai. Which son of David? Shlomo. The Gemara has a debate about it. No, that was by David. That was by David and Bathsheba. There was a machlokas. Anyway, Torah, right? Correct. Just by there. Even in the Navi, the Pashtas there is not simple because his son died. That son died.
Yeah.
Anyways, I don't know. But Lamaisa, we don't say this about anybody other than Chizkiah, this line about Kayim Zeh, Mashakasu Bazeh. Amar Rabbi Barachanam Haba Azilna Bahade de Rabbi Yochanan. He went to go ask a shaila to Rabbi Yochanan, the Mishal Shmaitza, to ask him about a sugya ki hava ayla beisakise while he was walking to the bathroom. You know those guys who chase the Rabbeim to ask shailas while they're walking into the bathroom. Give him some space, you know. All right, so he's walking. Rabbi Yochanan goes into the bathroom. Rabbi Beinim Minei Milsa, right when he gets out of the bathroom, he was polite enough to wait outside. And then when he gets out, he asks him the shaila. And Rabbi Yochanan didn't answer right away. Lo pashit la, he wouldn't respond to him. Ad mashi yade, he had to wash his hands. Pashut. Umanach tefillin, and then he put on his tefillin. Umevarich, and then he made a bracha. So it wasn't so. I presume the last bracha is Asher Yatzar, because it says manach tefillin and then mevarich, but that's not how we put on tefillin. So it has to be that I presume that mevarich has to be Asher Yatzar. I'm just guessing from the flow. I didn't look into this. I'm just assuming from the flow of the Gemara. Seems that way. Just on this note, gorgeous piece of Gemara and a gorgeous Maisa happened today. I did a bris today for a totally secular. I had to tell the one to say Amen, kind of a crew, you know. And this guy, the sister-in-law of the father of the baby came over. He's like, by the way, do you know how to put on tefillin? I'm like, yeah, everybody knows how to put on tefillin. He said, well, the father of the baby believes he's only put on tefillin one time in his life on a birthright trip when he was 18. Would you please help him to put on a pair of tefillin? So they had no kippas in the house. I have this video on my phone. I'll show you later. I gave him my kippah. I was wearing a Michigan hat with my suit tie. I'm like, Baruch Atah. I happened to have had in my car, but somebody had in the house. I had a little problem because he was a lefty and the tefillin were tefillin for the rest. So you put him on upside down so that the knot is on the inside. He got a little bit of a weird experience of the deal. He doesn't ever remember saying Shema. He said Shema with me. The record is beautiful.
Wow.
Beautiful. And I said to him, you've done 2, maybe even 3. Your Shema is really not on Bismano, but you've done a bunch of massive mitzvos today. This is the day. You got to get yourself a pair and make a habit out of it. It was beautiful. It's beautiful. But the funniest part of the video is I'm sitting there like focused with the hat was on backwards, got big M on the back of the hat. He's wearing my kippah and a pair of tefillin upside down. It looked like a scene from a comic strip. The whole thing was, but the Maisa was beautiful. The Pinta Yid is talking. He wanted to put on tefillin. It was beautiful. So here Rabbi Yochanan wouldn't answer until he had his tefillin back on. Umevarich lechora, again, that was him saying Asher Yotzar. And the Gemara says, V'hadar Amar Lan, and then Rabbi Yochanan, what did he say? Third of the way down, Yud Zayin Merav, he said, Afilu Kayim Amrina. You can even say kaim nowadays. If you have a real big tzaddik, you can say the same kaim that Chizkiah got, that this dead person kept that Torah. You're allowed to say that for someone today as long as they're a big tzaddik. But limeid lo amrina. But the limeid, the fact that you were a rebbe, a teacher, that you're not allowed to say. That's only for spitz people. That's only for the elite. And the Gemara says, wait 1 second. V'amar mar gadol Talmud Torah shah Talmud maybe lidei maisa. I understand there are other girsos here. I have shah Talmud. I have gadol Talmud Torah shah Talmud maybe lidei maisa. Other girsos, anybody?
Yes.
Gadol limud. So in the shiur that I listened to earlier today, it was also gadol limud. But here, that's not what the Gemara says. It's the Gemara says that learning Torah, gadol Talmud Torah, shat Talmud maybe lidei maisa l'chora. What's the ikar here? The learning brings you to do a maisa. So why would you say that limeid is better than kayim? Because the maisa is the best thing to do. There's midrashim like that. The Kodesh Baruch Hu says, please forget me. Just please keep my Torah. It's good for your neshama. It's good for you. I say this to people all the time, like whether or not you chap why it's important to do X doesn't mean it isn't important to do X even while you're trying to figure things out. Kodesh Baruch Hu's wisdom is a little bit beyond us. Kodesh Baruch Hu says, I don't want you to look at this. I don't want you to eat that. I don't want you to... As if, well, why? Doesn't matter why. It doesn't the mechanics. Well, why should I take Tylenol? Because it works. Just you think you're going to work on the path. Just let it be. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what he's talking about. So the Gemara says that the maisim are the ikar. So if the maisim are the ikar, so why are you telling me limeid is better? That was the implication of the Gemara. Lo kasha hala mikmar hala agmure. There is taka a difference between the mikmar and le agmure. Rashi, 15 lines down. Mikmar la'atzmo ma'isa adif. When it comes to you yourself, you're right. Actions are key. But if you have the opportunity to teach others, adif mi maisa, it's better than maisa. Hilkach limeid lo amrina, because that was the highest level. So now we have a pecking order. We have limeid being the highest level of an accolade you can give. Under that was kayim, that he kept all of halacha. Amar Rav Yochanan Mishum Rav Shimon ben Yochai. What does the pasuk mean when it says Ashrechem Zorei Kol Al Kol Mayim Mishalche Regel Hashor VeHachamor? The pasuk on its face is not so simple. Those who are happy, those who are planted Al Kol Mayim on the water Mishalche Regel, who sent out those who are Beregel Hashor VeHachamor. Says the Gemara, what's pshat in the pasuk? Halfway down, Yud Zayin Amud Aleph Kol HaOsek B'Torah V'Gmilus Chasadim. Anyone who's involved in Torah and in Gemilus Chasadim, Zochel Nachalas Shnei Shvatim, you will inherit the inheritance. You will merit the inheritance of two Shvatim. Shne'emar. When the pasuk says Ashrechem Zorei, how do we know that this is true? Ashrechem Zorei. What does that mean? Vein Zriya ala tzedakah, to do righteousness. Shne'emar Ziru lachem litzedakah v'katzur lefi chesed. You should plant doing righteousness and harvest doing acts of kindness. Vein mayim ela Torah. We know, of course, famously that water is compared to Torah, or I should say Torah is compared to water. And what does it mean that you're going to merit two Shvatim? So this says two different approaches. There's two different approaches. One is Zocha l'kila ki Yosef. You'll merit the kila, the same a praise like Yosef got. What kind of praise did Yosef get? Ben Poras Yosef benos tzada alei shur. The young girls would stand up on a bench above the wall to be able to see Yosef. I don't know why that's considered covered. It can't be just the aesthetics. That doesn't make sense. That's not the Torah way. It's got to be that there's another level, deeper level of cover here. And v'zochel nachalas Yisachar desiv Yisachar chamor garam. And the Targum on Yisachar chamor garam is actually very positive. Take a look at Rashi. 3 lines before the end of the parak, Rashi says chamor garam. What is it that was being praised in this pasuk? Metargemin on atir benichsin. Tuf and shin are interchangeable in Aramaic. Ashir benichsin. He was wealthy with property. So Yisachar chamor garam, that is one of the two nachalas shnei shvatim that you're going to have. So you'll have the covet of Yosef and you'll have the wealth of Yisachar. And Yista Amrei, that it was a little different. Oyavav noflan lifne lefanav ki Yosef. Your enemies will fall before you like Yosef. V'chsiv bahem amim yinagach yachtov afsei aretz. And v'zachar lebina ki Yisachar, you will merit the wisdom, the understanding that Yisachar t'chsiv b'mrei Yisachar yodei bina leitim ladas ma yaseh Yisrael. Whatever the case may be, that if a person is osek in Torah and in Gemilus Chasadim, then you will be zochel and nachala shnei shvatim, either kavod and wealth. That was approach number 1, or that your enemies will fall before you, and bina. That's approach number 2. Hadron Allah Arba Avos Baruch Hashem. We finished the first parak of Maseches Bava Kama, the first parak of the Bavas. As we know, it's really not the Masechta properly. It's actually called Maseches Nezikin. It's just truncated into 3 things: Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, Bava Basra, and we have finished the first parak of the first of the Bavas. Yiratzon, we should come back to this daf in 7.5 years. Says the Gemara 10 lines from the bottom at a new Mishnah on Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. The Mishnah says, Ketzad haregel mu'edes. We've actually seen this before in other frames, but we're going to analyze it a little bit more deeply. This parak that we're about to learn, certainly in the very beginning, has a lot of very technical but very important pieces, kind of shas concepts, as we'll soon see. Some that we've seen already, and some that we're gonna learn new. So, Ketzad haregel mu'edes. How is it that the legs of an animal could be muad? Because we know that an animal walks and breaks things all the time. That's what the Gemara says. L'shaber b'derech hilucha. When a cow is walking and it steps on a little piece of pottery, it has no idea what it did. It didn't know the pottery was there. He didn't know he stepped on it. He didn't know he broke it. He didn't know whose it was. And that's why he's muad from the beginning. And then the next line sounds very similar as well. We're going to ask on this in the Mishnah. That a behema is muad to walk in its regular way to break things. Sounds extremely similar to the previous case. We will ask why we have both of these languages. But let's say the animal kicks it up a notch. He's no longer walking regularly, but rather he's kicking, or as he's walking, when he steps on the edge of a stone, it kicks up and then it goes to break something. And then if either he kicks or he kicks up a rock and the rock breaks something, mishalim chatzi nezek. Then he pays chatzi nezek, as we spoke about yesterday. Chatzi nezek tzroros has a halacha l'Moshe Sinai that it's only considered to be chatzi nezek. Let's continue in the Mishnah. Darsa al hakli. Let's say that the animal steps on a regular kli, which he's muad to do. Vishavartu, and it breaks. And v'nafal al kli v'shavro. So I step on kli number 1, not I. The cow steps on kli number 1. A shard of the pottery kicks up and breaks another kli. So what do we consider that? So the Gemara says, ala rishon, on the first one, mishalem nezek shalem, because you're muad to do that. And and on the second one, you're going to be mishalim chatzi nezek, because all of that is begeder tzororos of that secondary type of injury, of damage. 2 lines from the bottom, as we end this page and this Mishnah, hatar negolin, when you have chickens, muadin lahalech kadarkanu l'shaber, they are completely chaotic animals. They're walking, they're moving, they're constantly kicking things and breaking things. The bigger they are, the harder they fall, but they break things all the time. So they're muad out of the gate. Shall be chayiv nezek shalom for any of the damages that they may do. Haya delil kashur biraglav. If there was something that was tied to the leg of the chicken, or it was behaving in a weird way. Rashi says that mehades, 4 lines from the bottom, the Rashi says it's meraked. If the animal is dancing. Now, I don't think that Rashi means dancing in a classical way. I think it means like if it's kind of running around in an atypical way for this chicken, and then it causes damage. The Gemara says, Mishalem Chatzi Nezek. Here too, this is similar to the world of Chatzi Nezek Tzororos. That turns us to the top of Yud Zayin Amud Beis. We'll be stopping 3/4 of the way down, about 8 lines into the wide lines at the 2 dots. That's where we're going to be stopping. Then we'll pick up tomorrow. Right now, we're at the top line of Yud Zayin Amud Beis, and we're going to ask a question that I've already foreshadowed, which is a question between the first 2 lines of the Mishnah. Line number 1 of our Mishnah said, Regel is muad to walk, and line 2 says a behema is muad to walk. So asks the Gemara, Amar le Ravina le Rava, Hainu Regel, Hainu behema. Those 2 lines are exactly the same thing. Why are you teaching these 2 things? They're both the same. The Gemara responds, Amar le, no. Tan avos v'katani toldos. The first case of regel is the av. The second case in our Mishnah, when it says behema, is talking about toldos. Says the Gemara, if that's true, elameata, seifa, what about the end? The katani, what does it say in the seifa? This seifa can be found on Yud Testament Beis. We'll get there shortly. There it says hashein mu'edes and habehema mu'edes. My avos and my toldos ika. Those 2 things are not the same. The shein is its own av, and what do you mean by behema? They're both muad. So you're saying they're both av and they're both toldos. So says the Gemara in a little bit of a joking manner, hava kamahadr le bibdichusa. That Rava kind of gave a little bit of a joking comment back to Ravina. He says, Amar le ana shenoi chada. I answered the first one. The at shani chada. It's time for you to answer one. a little playful. And Lamaisa, the Gemara says, V'taima mai. Why is it that in this second brisa, which is located 3 lines down and really located on Yud Testament base, why is it that we say Hashem mu'edes and Abehema mu'edes? Amar Ravashi, Tana Shein dechaya, v'katani Shein de behema. We're not talking about avos and toldos. We're talking about 2 different avos. One that applies by a chaya, by smaller animals, and one that applies by a behema, that is larger animals. We're not talking about avos and toldos in the Mishnah and Yud Testament base. We're talking about shtei avos, but 2 different aspects of animals. Shein by a chaya and shein by a behema. And salka daita chamino, we actually need to teach both dinim, the din of shein by a chaya and shein by a behema. Because I might have thought that v'shilach as be'iro, be'iro is a reference to larger animals. Ksi behema in chayalo. I might have thought that the din of shein only applied by a behema, a larger animal, kamashma dechai b'chlal behema, that we even apply the dinim of shein by a small animal, and that answers up perfectly well. Yachi says the Gemara, if what you're saying is that the Gemara on the 3rd line, and its roots are in your Testament base, that Hashem mu'edes and Abehema mu'edes, one's talking about a chaya, and one's talking about a behema, Yachi, haimi boile lemisne bereisha, we should have taught the case of behema first, because we said that a chaya is bichlal behema. We should have said a behema has an av of shein, and guess what? So does a chaya. So why is it that the order was written first, the shein of the chaya, followed by the shein of the behema? The Gemara gives an answer like we've seen numerous times in Shas. Hai de asya le midrasha chaviva le. When we have to learn something out from a drasha, it's not explicit in Chumash, and we have to learn it out from a drasha, that's more chaviv. When something's explicit in Chumash, it's less chaviv. Why? Ayin in the Rishonim. But the Gemara says that that's why we had the shein de chaya first. We wanted the case of chaya first because that had to be learned out from a drasha. That was learned out from V'shilach as be'iro a couple of lines ago. That's why it goes first. So says the Gemara, Yihachi, if that's true, Bereisha nami lisne hahi deloksiva Bereisha. In the Reisha also, namely in our Mishnah, what should it have said? It should have said the Tolda first. If you look back in our Mishnah, the way we answered up our Mishnah is we said that the first line of the Mishnah was Haregel Mu'edes. We said that was talking about an Av. And then we said the second line is not explicit in Chumash, it's a Tolda, HaBehema. So if you're saying that whichever is learned out in a drasha is Chaviva, so then why in our Mishnah didn't Behema go first? Because it wasn't explicit in Chumash. The Gemara says, Achi Hashta, that's not a good question. We're about 12 lines down on Yud Zayin Amud Beis. Says the Gemara, you can't even bother asking this question. It makes no sense. Hasam, the Mishnah that we have on the 3rd line and on Yud Testament Beis, is Idi v'Idi Avos Ninhu and Hachta Asile Midrasha Chavivale. Both of them are in the same genre of Avos, and the one that's learned out from a drasha, that's the one that goes first. That's why Shein goes first in the Mishnah on Yud Testament Beis. However, when we're talking about our Mishnah, where they're not both avos, but rather one is an av and one is a tolda, shavik av tani tolda. You're going to take regel, which is an av, and you're going to switch it out for the tolda. That's totally not appropriate, and therefore that's why our Mishnah is in the order in which it is in. Av first, tolda second. The Gemara says a quarter of the way down, maybe a little bit more, maybe there's another answer, that the reason why our Mishnah at the beginning of this parak begins the way that it does is because Aidi de Salik me regel, Pasach beregel, that perhaps the reason why our Mishnah at the open of the parak on Yud Zayin Amud Aleph started out with Ketzad Regel is because that's what our previous parak was talking about when we closed out the parak. And that's what the Gemara says is the reason why our Mishnah opens with regel. That brings us to the Tanu Rabbanan, a third of the way down in Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. The Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan behema mu'edes lechol kedarka u'leshaber. This is a new brisa. It's very common in Shas to find brisas, toseftas, and midrashei Chazal that look like our Mishnah, very, very similar, so that we can compare and contrast them. In fact, in very, very early manuscripts of the Gemara, well before what we have, which is the Warsaw layout of the Gemara, with the Gemara on the side, Rashi on the inside, and Tos on the outside, there's a very old manuscript from, I think it's from the 1500s, where the manuscript's from the 1500s, but the text was even older, where there was no Shak Levatari in the Gemara at all. It was our Mishnah, a Tosefta, a Brisa, and that was it. So I can show you a copy. This is fascinating as to how the Gemara developed over the years. Nevertheless, this brisa is brought over here as a contrast to our Mishnah. It says behema mu'edes lahalach kedarko l'shaber, that when a behema walks, it's muad to damage things, and you'd be chayiv in nezek shalom. Ketzad, what's the case? Behema shenichnas alachatzer anisak. Let's say a behema walks in. I own this behema, and it walks into your yard, v'hizika begufa derech hilucha, and it breaks something with its body. Its body walks past your fence and breaks your fence. Uvisara derech hilucha. Its hair, the mane of the animal, gets stuck and drags and breaks something. V'ukaf she'aleha, or with the saddle that's on the animal, uvishalev she'aleha, or with the packages that are on the animal, ubeprumbia shebefiha, or with that piece that's in its mouth, that metal piece that breaks things, bezug shebesavara, or with a bell that's on its neck, v'chamor b'masao, or a donkey, which known to carry a lot of packages on its sides. In all of these cases, the animal is considered muad to behave that way. It's not even behavior, it's just the way he walks. Therefore, because he's muad, mishalem nezek shalim. Says the Gemara, seemingly out of complete left field, Sumchus argues on the Tanakama and says, yeah, but Omer tzroros, he says, when it comes to tzroros, v'chazir shahayan over ba'ashba v'hizik, or a pig that was digging around in the garbage and caused damage, mishalem nezek shalim. Thank you very much. We were not talking about what you're talking about. The Tanakama was talking about a case of an animal with either its body breaking something, its hair, the saddle, the packages. Why are you talking about tzroros? Why are you talking about a pig? Not only that, hizik pshita. Of course, if you are mazik, you're going to be chayiv nezek shalim. Thank you, Sumchus. What are you adding? Elaema, you're right. What Sumchus is adding is a couple of things. Hitis v'hizik. We're not talking about direct damage. We're talking about indirect damage. That's when the animal steps on a rock. The rock kicks out from under its hoof, and then that flying rock breaks something. There, mishalim nezek shalim. So says the Gemara, okay, I hear you, but the flow of Sumchus in this brisa doesn't make any sense. Tzroros man dekar shmei. Who was talking about rocks? If you look back at the Tanu Rabbanan a third of the way down and look at the Tanakama, you'll read the Tanakama, you'll see that it wasn't talking about anything with rocks. And then what did Sumchus say? Sumchus omer tzroros. So the Gemara says, man dekar shmei. Who in the world was talking about rocks? And the Gemara says, you're 100% right. We're just about exactly halfway down on Yud Zayin Amud Beis. Another third of the page to go. Says the Gemara, Chasure mechzer avahachik Tana, you're 100% right. There is something that's missing from the Tanakama's Shita. Let's drill in. What is the Tanakama talking about? Tzeroros ki orchaihu chatzi nezek. When rocks are kicked up in their normal way, that's chatzi nezek, because it's just normal. That's orchaihu. These parts were missing from the Tanakama. Now they're added in. If you have a pig that's digging around in the garbage, and something that the pig does causes for something to shoot out of the garbage and it breaks something else, mishalim chati nezek. Here, Sumchus argues. Sumchus omer no. Tzeroros v'chazer shayin over bashba v'hitis v'hizik mishalim nezek shalim. Machlokes Tanakama and Sumchus about chati nezek and nezek shalim by tzeroros. The Gemara is now going to give a whole host of cases where Sumchus argues on the Tanakama. Tanu Rabbanan, 3 lines before the wide lines on Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. Tarnagolan, there were chickens. Shahayim africhen mimakom lamakom. They were flying from place to place. V'shavru kelim bechanfehem. As they were flying, their wing directly hit something, direct contact, wing to item, and it broke something. The din is mishalman nezek shalim. That's direct contact. That's a normal way. That's orchaihu for a tarnagol. It's considered muad, and therefore the halacha is that he's chayiv nezek shalim. Says the Gemara, but listen to this. Let's say that a bird damages something with the wind that's created by the swoop of their wing. So the animal takes its wing and swoops down, and then it breaks something. Says the Gemara, last of the short lines, Beruach shebechanfeihem, that's mishalman chatzi nezek. That's indirect. And by the way, big birds, wow, they create a lot of lift with their wings. You talk about these massive birds, like they're birds that fly 200 miles an hour. The peregrine falcon can free fall at over 200 miles an hour controlled to attack prey. They are moving. That is not a normal speed for, I think it's the fastest animal in the world, actually. It's not normal what they do. When you're talking about their wings flapping, there's a lot of air. That air, when it causes damage, chatzi nezek, it's indirect. It's like tziroros. Says the Gemara first of the long lines. No, Sumchus argues. Sumchus omer nezek shalim. And similarly, Tanya idach, the Gemara says in a brisa, tarnagolin shahayu mehadsen. You have these tarnagolin that were jumping around, al gabe isa on top of dough, val gabe peros on fruits, v'tinfu, and they made all of the fruits dirty with their gross bodies. Nikru, or they were picking at the fruits. You could imagine sometimes when you go to the store, you're picking out apples, you see the apple that's got the little hole in it. Birds can do that with their beaks. So the Gemara says in such a case, that's direct, that's regular damage, that's muad. And therefore the din is mishal nezek shalim. However, helu afar o tziroros, let's say that they, through their movements, they carried dust up or they carried rocks up, mishal men chati nezek, that's the Tanakama. And as we would expect, sumchus omer nezek shalim, I disagree, that is considered nezek shalim. However, this next brisa, Tanya idach, is actually like the sheet of the Rabbanan, because for some reason Sumchus doesn't argue. For 3 lines into the wide lines, 2/3 of the way down, Tanya idach, the brisa writes, Tarnagol, there's a chicken, shahaya mafrech mimakom lamakom, it was flying from place to place. The yatzisa ruach mitachas kanfav, the wind from under its wing billows out. The shibra es hakelim, and breaks things. Mishalim chatzi nezek. Where's Sumchus? So the Gemara says, Stama Rabbanan. We found a Mari Makom that supports the sheet of the Rabbanan that really it is Chati Nezek when we talk about Tziroros. Omar Rava just analyzes this odd shita that we have. Bishlama Sumchus, I understand the sheet of Sumchus when it comes to Tziroros. According to Sumchus, the reason why you have to pay Nezek Shalim is because Savar Kocho Kigufo Dami. Sumchus holds that if you cause something to happen, even if it's indirect, but you're the cause, and because you're the cause, you have to pay nezek shalim. That makes sense. Ela Rabbanan, but according to the Rabbanan who hold that it's chatzi nezek, that's difficult because ike gufo dami. If you want to say that really that indirect action is also gufo, that the wing when it touches something it's muad, and also the wind of that wing which breaks something should be muad. Then kulei nezek boy l'shalim. Then you should be no different than Sumchus, that it should be nezek shalim. The ilav kigufo dami. And if you, the Rabbanan, who hold that tziroros is chati nezek, if you hold that really that gufo is your kocho is not gufo, that your indirect actions really are not the same, then chati nezek nami lo l'shalim. Then you shouldn't have to pay anything at all. Why is chati nezek the payment of tziroros according to the Rabbanan? The Gemara says, and with this we'll close, Hadar Amarava, Le'olam really kigufo dami. Really the Rabbanan agree to Sumchus in principle that kocho is gufo. What's the line here? That Le'olam kigufo dami, that kocho is kigufo. The wind that is generated by the wing is no different than the wing. But here, the chati nezek tzroros, Hilchasa Gemirila. The reason why the Rabbanan hold that Chati Nezek Tziroros, that when we deal with an indirect damage, the reason why it's Chati Nezek is not because of any svara. It's not because of any logic. It's because it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Of course, we know there's a list of some 30 odd halachos l'Moshe Sinai throughout Shas, and these were told directly to Moshe. We know them by Mesorah. They're listed here in the Gemara. There actually is a collected list of all the halachos l'Moshe Sinai. This is one of them, that Chati Nezek is Tziroros, and that's why it is Chati Nezek. We'll stop right here. Mir Hashem will pick up tomorrow night with Daf Yud Ches. Wishing you all a beautiful night. Housekeeping note, we will be live on Wednesday, but not in person. Same time, just on Zoom.